If you're listening to this, you are the resistance.
Hello, thanks for joining. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about cyber attacks and the possible loss of the power grid by various different methods. So we'll start here with outgoing Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano, who had a warning open message to her successor, and that was that a massive and serious cyber attack on the U.S. homeland is coming, and a natural disaster, the likes of which the nation has never seen, is also likely on its way. And it's not just that dire warning from Janet. We have a senator from North Dakota who says our power system is very vulnerable. You could see it shut down by hackers and cyber terror. You could see it shut down for days, weeks, or months, crippling the country and causing enormous havoc. Another representative from Massachusetts, with one well-placed keystroke, Americans could be plunged into darkness and chaos through the damage to our electric grid. Foreign enemies are employing web warriors to attack our way of life, and it's time that our actions respond to that potential threat. And you'll also see, if you pause, you can read some other quotes here from representatives and other policymakers. Now, one of the ways that the power grid could go down would be from a burst from the sun. I think it's called a Carrington Event, which happened in 1859 and apparently took down the telegraph system, and sparks were flying out of that. Obviously today, with our electric grid way more enormous and dependent upon it we are, it would have a much bigger effect on us. And apparently we don't have any sort of protection against it. The transformers would all get blown, etc., etc. And here he goes. A Carrington event would be a solar burst that would cause the power grid to go down. And that would not be good for numerous reasons. Another way that the power grid could be taken down would be a EMP, or an electromagnetic pulse weapon. That could be either a weapon in itself, or is what happens on the discharge of a nuclear device in the atmosphere. So enemies or the use of this weapon, whether a nuke or a EMP, over the power grid could effectively knock it out for a period of time. And by a period of time, anywhere over a week would cause riots, turmoil in all major cities. Anything over a month would probably mean millions of deaths just from the electric grid being down. Now, this gentleman here, who's looking to sell some of his books, I was doing an interview. Kevin Freeman has some interesting things to say. I think he definitely toes the state line clearly, but we'll listen to a few things he has to say. I have a rebuttal to some of them and understand where the mentality about the possibility of cyber attack could affect the country.
And what I found was the next type of war that we will face, it's not going to be a shooting war, it's not going to be guns and tanks and aircraft carriers, it will be cyber economic in nature. This is what all of our enemies have said, because they don't want to take on the military head-to-head now. They've said, we will crash the American economy if we get into a war. Now, that's not just conjecture. That's what Vladimir Putin said just recently when he invaded the Ukraine, and we said, we'll slap sanctions on you. His response was, you don't want to do that because I can crash your stock market. I can hack your financial systems. I can dump the dollar. The very things that I wrote about in 2008 and then covered in Game Plan.
Okay, right there, partial truth. To my knowledge, Vladimir Putin never said that he would hack us. What he was implying was that, yeah, we don't want to put sanctions on them because America owes a lot of money to a lot of people, and Russia is one of them. Earlier in this interview, he tried to say that Russia had already dropped all their securities in the U.S. In 2008 to try to create more of a market meltdown for us. Well, that's not true. Otherwise, Putin's threat would have been full of air. But the fact of the matter is he could have dropped all of his U.S. dollars back into the market and would have flooded, causing inflation and causing the Fed to have to absorb those again, back to quantitative easing, would have affected the markets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're in a huge economic mess. And I want to make that point clear. The United States is in a huge economic mess, and we're going to need someone to point the finger at for that. So whether it's the sun or a cyber attack is yet to be determined. All right, here's a Reuters article. U.S. regulators warn banks about rise in cyber attacks. This was Wednesday, April 2nd, 2014. A group of top U.S. regulators on Wednesday warned about the threat of rising cyber attacks, urging the industry to put proper measures in place to guard against fraud. So the banks are going to be attacked in these cyber things. The banks are going to need another bailout, and this time it's not about money necessarily. It's going to be about saving face, so that they have an excuse, a reason, someone to point the finger at as to why they lost so much money and why we are in the trouble we're in. In this article here from the Huffington Post, there's 2 points I wanted to bring out. First, that the U.S. can launch cyber attacks, but can't defend against them. Now, the first part, that we actually do use cyber attacks. Now, they've been deemed as possible acts of war, but that doesn't keep us from utilizing them against our so-called enemies, including Iran and China. So we've used these two on Iran's supposed nuclear program by launching the Stuxnet virus. All the time in China, we're caught using hacking, and they do it back and forth, and that's all fine. The other issue is here we have no protection against any sort of this hacking, whatever, and which is a curious condition to be in, to know that that's to say it's such a huge risk and a potential catastrophe, but yet not have anything to defend against it. Why would you do that?
Right now, what kind of defense do we have up against such an economic attack?
Unfortunately, we don't have anything at the national level. General Keith Alexander, outgoing head of the NSA, has said recently, in fact, he was on 60 Minutes, and he said, basically our enemies know how to crater our financial system, and there's nothing we can do to stop it at this point. We can't.
In fact, in this New York Times article talks about a drill that was conducted in November that was actually taking the grid down. I think over 2,000 companies participated, simulating this kind of knockout blow that would happen. And the electric grid, as government and private experts described it, is a glass jaw of American industry. Now, why don't we just make sure everyone knows this, project this to everyone? Hey, this is where to punch us. This is where we're most vulnerable. And even here, New York Times again, so this was done in March, powered grid preparedness falls short, report says. So not only did we, have this exercise simulating this actual event, but it falls short, of course. So basically saying that this Grid X2, short for grid exercise, showed that we're in fact, we are as vulnerable and things are as in bad shape as we thought they were. The reason why I bring this up is, we're going to have a scapegoat. The thing about a cyber attack is it it's very difficult to point it at anybody specifically. You basically can say anything. Right now, the United States has a tremendous ability to perform cyber attacks, but who knows who's doing that? But we can tell by the media who's being pushed as possible villains in this, and they're the what we're used to hearing by now. But now we have Iran and Russia partnering up to launch cyber attacks. Iran now a world-class cyber threat. Okay, and this is the Washington Free Beacon. Here's one you'll hear often about. I think these guys will probably be blamed for the banking hacks and cyber attacks, since they've already been, not the nature of its relationship with the Syrian government is unclear, but yet it's called the Syrian Electronic Army, and they use denial of service attacks, defacement. They'll hack everything from Facebook to using phishing schemes to try to close down banks. But Syria being a target for the government of the United States, I would expect to see more in the news about attacks from these guys, especially aiming towards banks, stocks, more corporate type. So in this piece here, NPR News, I guess I just wanted to point out and reiterate the fact that the U.S. doesn't lay out strict rules as to how it would use cyber weapons or how it does use cyber weapons. So how do we expect anyone else to? We've never acknowledged a role in the Iran attacks, even though it was called the Olympic Games and the Code Word, and it was done by the NSA and pretty much cat's out of the bag. But of course we can't admit to doing it because that would be considered an act of war. And apparently we're, as much as we'd like to be, we're still not at war with Iran or Syria or China or Russia. Okay, as I finish up here, just kind of want to pull things together for you. So we have the government and officials warning of an imminent cyber attack, a imminent power grid failure, and exercises by the government, seeing our vulnerability to that, saying that we don't have anything in place, we have no protections against it. And what does that mean? Well, the economy is in bad shape, and it needs someone to blame. There are countries that we need to or wish to go to war with, but people have been resistant to so far. So we can blame the economy failure on another country, in which case we would have a reason to attack them. That would take two birds with one stone, so to speak. Also, if the power grid went down, we could come back and create this smart grid, which is kind of, we need a reason to really overhaul that complete electrical service providing and the infrastructure. That would be a good reason for that. And this smart grid would be, further control of government, corporate elitists over everything from electric use in areas, households, etc., for taxation purposes, for ecological, environmental, so-called causes of tampering down the use of electricity. And I'll leave you finally with this last clip. So thanks for listening. Please subscribe. Check out our other videos and our films. Thanks. Until next time.
Another one is keep more than 2 days of food in your pantry and 2 days of water. If the electric grid were hacked and taken down, it might take a week, 10 days, longer if it were a serious attack like an EMP. Keep a little food on supply on hand. We're the only nation that we live in a just-in-time society, but we're the only nation in the world that doesn't have access to food or water beyond just a day or two. If the pumps stop working, what do you? And I'm not talking about being crazy and moving into the basement as a prepper and all of that. And by the way, preppers seem less and less crazy to me all the time.